Welcome to our podcast, Ways They Should Go, where we take the Sunday school lessons from our Sunday school and we apply them as parents. My name is Chris Evans. I'm a substitute teacher here at First Baptist Church Ozark, and I'm joined this week by...
I'm Todd Sublett. I'm one of the adult Sunday school teachers here at First Baptist Ozark, and we have a class of other folks about my age, but I have 3 grown kids of my own, so I can relate to the children's classes as well, hopefully.
Oh, I might throw this in at the beginning of the episode. Next week is a review week, and so we're picking a topic, and we're going to talk about media and kids. Well, so this week we studied Joseph, Jacob and his blessings that he gave to all of his children, including Joseph and Joseph's children. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to assume that you studied the lesson, that you know what it's about, and we're going to talk about how it relates to parenting and talk about parenting application. But a real quick summary, well, I guess there isn't much to say, honestly. It's just Joseph blesses all his sons.
Jacob. Jacob, Joseph.
Joseph does bless his sons, but
Joseph's dad, Jacob, yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
But Genesis 49, they can read Genesis 49, right?
I mean, that's really all it's at. Genesis 49, bless this son, and this son, and this son, and then he dies. So, he doesn't die immediately, but that's the end of the chapter. Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. So we're just going to apply that to parenting. I think our first note as we're talking about this is that Jacob did not bless all of his kids the same.
No.
He blessed each one of them differently, and particularly according to their actions in life that he had seen. And so that demonstrates to us, like he's being a father in that moment, and he demonstrates to us that we should not treat all of our kids the same. We should treat them as appropriately in life. And there's a lot more application there than I think strictly comes from the text, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. God does not interact with us the same, everybody. He responds to each one of us as our character, and that's what he's doing here. God follows through on these blessings, right? Reuben was the firstborn, generally would receive the blessing.
Right. Well, the firstborn son would receive the blessing. And as we saw in an earlier lesson, Jacob steal from Esau, he would receive the bigger portion of the earthly goods too. Right?
Yeah.
So the firstborn was a special spot. And but
here we see, Jacob says, you are my firstborn, my might and my fruits. But then in verse 4, unstable as water, you shall not have providence, right? So there's you would do this, but you're not getting it because of your actions in life. And God follows through on that. And instead, that blessing that would have gone to him goes to Judah instead. And he becomes preeminent. So what are your thoughts on treating kids differently?
Oh, yeah. No, well, and a couple more examples from here, like with Judah, apparently, because Judah made some mistakes of his own.
That's true.
Apparently, there were some redeeming things about Judah because he gets the greater blessing. And in fact, as we know, God blesses his people and through Judah, and they become the ruling tribe and even the Messiah. So the blessing to us through the ancestry of Jacob comes down through Judah. So it's interesting to me that we're told a lot of things in the Bible, but we're not told everything. So like Judah must have had some redeeming qualities and may have done some things to sort of turn around some of his mistakes.
We see some of that with Joseph, right? When he when they go back to see Joseph, right?
When they come to Egypt. That's right. Yep.
Steps up and says, you need to send Benjamin or we're all going to die. And Judah's like, I don't want to do that. Not Judah.
Reuben.
Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob was like, I don't want to send Benjamin. And Judah steps up and says, no, let me take responsibility. And then when he's faced with that consequence of Benjamin is going to be killed, he steps up and says, no. Let the consequence fall on me. It's my fault. So he steps up and he changes his attitude, whereas we don't see that characteristic coming
Genesis
from
44.
from Reuben.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the other, and so to that point, one of the things we see about children's actions and their consequences is that, in God's, as part of God's plan and part of God's family, we can make mistakes, and a big part of it is to overcome them. And I think a big part as we teach our children and as we set examples, as we model things for our kids, we want to show them that God is greater than our mistakes, and that we, in wanting to follow and serve God, can overcome those things and be part of, be a blessing to others in spite of maybe some of the things that we get wrong. I mean, we're all human. We're all going to fail. I'm pretty blessed. I don't have a lot of regrets, but I do have a few, especially things that I've said wrong to, especially loved ones, my family members or my kids. But, a big part is to keep building that relationship and keep doing the positive things so that we don't just get stuck in our mistakes, or we don't let our mistakes cause us to have more regrets. It's amazing how that cycle can really cause us to get stuck if we're not careful.
Yeah, yeah. What was that example that you were talking about before we started? About different kids responding differently to actions.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody remembers Promise Keepers now. It's an organization that was big
with it, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. So some people do.
20 or 30 years ago, when I was fairly new in terms of at least God using people in my life and in my church to get my attention, Promise Keepers was a huge thing. And one of the examples that one of the speakers gave once was a couple of different guys. One, and I honestly don't know if this was a real life example or not. I don't remember that much of it. But one of them was a drunkard and pretty much, had not done much with his life, had kind of wasted his life away. The other had made a name for himself. He was a successful businessman, and he had been successful in doing a lot of things in terms of, rising to a challenge, making a name for himself by not giving up. And they asked each of them what they felt like was a pivotal turning point, or what really made them choose the path that they did. And the guy that said, that really hadn't made much of himself, he said, well, my dad was harsh and judgmental, and I just never felt like I could get past that. I could never live up to his standards, and so I just gave up. I didn't even try. I always felt like I was never good enough. They asked the same question to the successful businessman, and he said, well, my dad was harsh and judgmental, and I felt like I didn't ever want that to make it to keep me down. I always wanted to rise above that. I always wanted to be able to meet challenges and overcome them. And so as his life went on, that's what he did. And so two different people, two of the same situation, and yet very different responses.
Yeah. Our kids are gonna, and we do, respond. Everybody responds to a situation differently. You even twins, they turn out different people, different personalities, because they respond to situations differently. We all do. And in that example, the father, if he was a good father,
right,
and he wasn't in that case, but if he was a good father, and those two were brothers, he would say, I see this is what's happening in this kid. If I challenge him, push him, he's going to respond to those challenges by wanting to overcome them. And so I'm gonna push him, and I'm gonna challenge him.
Give him new challenges, right?
Yeah. And in the other son, you could see, when I push him and I'm judgmental on him, he doesn't respond positively. So I'm gonna try to encourage him, and I'm gonna respond to his response differently. Right? I'm going to treat him differently.
Building in, yeah.
And that's a lesson for us as parents about how we should treat our kids, because I think, Jacob's kids all turned out very different, and we see that difference in the way that we see it in Jacob, and we see it in Isaac, and we see it in Abraham, right? They treat their kids differently, and those kids turn out that has consequences on the way that their kids turn out.
Yeah.
And go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, it also speaks to, to your point, because it is a really good point. We as parents, wanting to be good parents, we have to pay attention to our kids and their responses. And in a lot of these ways, even Jacob, Jacob became a very godly man. He didn't necessarily start out that way. God called him, he wrestled with God, God taught him a lot of things along the way. And it's hard to know exactly how that all played into the lives of his kids, but obviously them being, them being the ancestors for Israel, all those things had consequences that were long lasting and that went all the way down through the tribes and, affected a lot of different things. So I think one of the things you said earlier was we never know just how far reaching the consequences of our actions.
No, we don't.
Be. And we as parents need to be on the alert for those things so that we can help steer and mold our kids and try to guide them when they do make mistakes to keep from making more.
Yeah.
To do the positive things and keep on the right track.
The consequences for our actions are big. In this case, they're really, really big because these blessings that Jacob give are not just for that particular person, but it's actually the impact on their whole line. He blesses or curses, however you want to look at it. Let's see. He says Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. And then he says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And both of them they were scattered. The tribe of Levi, even though there was a redemption for the tribe of Levi later when they obeyed, they were the only tribe to respond to Moses' call to clean up the iniquity that was happening in the camp. But even so, they never had a place to call their own. They were still scattered throughout Israel. They did not have a place. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but Simeon, I think they ended up they were very scattered and they didn't flourish and stay in their place like the other tribes did. So these consequences for their actions in their lives have far, far-reaching effects. But that principle still applies today, that your actions have consequences on not just yourself, not just your kids, but even their kids and even those kids. And God says, and this is not something that has gone away, that he will visit the iniquity of the fathers to the fourth generation. And then I think he turns around on the other side and says, but the blessings of righteousness to the 10th generation. So there is consequences for our negative actions and our positive actions. And they're going to have far-reaching effects. And we need to take that seriously as parents and teach our kids the ways that they should go. So hopefully they do not depart from it.
Well, and one of the things as we teach our kids, and of course we start at a really young age, whether we realize it or not, we tend to, and of course there's a lot of secular ideas about parenting. Some of them may jive with biblical ideas, others don't. And so there's been a lot of emphasis on positive reinforcement, which is definitely a thing.
Yes.
We see that throughout Scripture, that we're to be encouragers, we're to be positive role models, we're to be positively guiding. But on the other hand, it tells us not to spare the rod, that we're not to spare the negative consequences or the things that we want to make sure that they don't do. And so I think biblically, there is a differentiation from the way the world views consequences or the way the world views parenting actions versus the biblical model for it, that, hey, if we see something going that a kid's going wrong on, we want to step in there and make sure that doesn't continue in that direction. We want, and a lot of times that means having some discipline. Hey, I mean,
Discipline is important.
Yeah, exactly. There's punishment that comes, and they have to associate. They have to learn through our own punishment that there are consequences for wrong actions. And that actually is loving. I mean, we're told over and over again in the Bible that God Himself loves us in a way that He rebukes those He loves. And correction, those corrective things show love to our kids by keeping them from harming themselves and others from harming them by their mistakes, so that we can give them punishment that is negative consequences so that they won't have to experience bigger negative consequences later.
Yeah. The reality is that we live in a world that has consequences for our actions.
Very much so.
And we talked about this, I think, in a previous episode with Joseph forgiving his brothers. Like all of Egypt was glad and had joy because Joseph forgave his brothers. And so our actions have consequences beyond just like myself, my kids, but the others around me as well. And so I don't think we come into the world understanding that.
No, no, definitely.
Our kids they don't just naturally get the idea of consequences. We have to teach them that there are consequences. And so, on a immediate level, we spank our kids. We should spank our kids to teach them that there are consequences for their actions. When you do something bad, bad things happen. That's the reality. And for young kids, an immediate negative response is the only way that, I don't want to say the only way, but pretty much the only way that they can learn that. Yeah,
because if they don't get that, if we don't step in right away, if we don't give that immediate response, then I don't want to give the analogy of our pets, but in a lot of ways, now as I'm older, I have a dog that I love, and he's become like a fill-in child, because I've still got him at home, and my other kids are all gone. But it is one of those things where there needs to be an immediate action, because otherwise it doesn't have the impact that it's, and it may not necessarily be. There's where the analogy should stop. Kids, unlike dogs, hopefully remember a little longer what they've done. My dog may not remember past the last 30 seconds, but hopefully even a toddler does. But still, that impact of stepping in and saying, no, Jimmy, don't run through the house because you're going to hit. I don't want you to run into stuff. I don't want you to run into the coffee table. I don't know why they make coffee tables with such sharp edges at that right height. But stop him before that negative thing happens. And if he takes off running right after that, then we have to stop him again right away. And if he continues to do that, like you say, the punishment has to escalate, or we have to get to the point where it makes an impact on him.
Yeah. And the purpose of all of that, and the purpose of all of our punishments for our kids, because we got to recognize we are not the judge, right? We are teaching our kids about the judge. We are teaching our kids about the real consequences of their actions. And that's a prime example, right? Your kid is going to run into the coffee table and really hurt themselves. It could be really bad.
Scar right here.
Right. It could be really bad. And so instead of doing that, we give them a lesser punishment so that they learn the behavior. They learn that there are consequences. And then as they grow older, they mature, then we can teach them the reason that I spanked you was so that you didn't do this worse thing. And so expanding that out to an eternal perspective, we teach our kids, we give our kids punishments as a demonstration that there are consequences for their actions, so that as they mature and they learn, we can say, now these are the immediate consequences, and there's consequences in this life for your actions, but there's eternal consequences for your actions too. And this thing that I'm doing to you teaches you, hopefully, that about those eternal consequences that there are. And also to live life, we have to understand that there are consequences in this life as well for our actions. So the goal of punishment and that we give our kids is to teach them. And I think even here, God is teaching these people and the people of Israel and us lessons about consequences.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because we haven't talked a lot about it yet, although indirectly it comes into play over and over again. Of course, when you're in God's Word, God's going to come into play. But, teaching our kids about consequences also teaches them about who God is. That people get very wrong ideas of God. Sometimes by not studying the scriptures at all, other times by just kind of taking the hit and miss or the parts that they like and then, ignoring the rest. But the fact is that we live in a sinful and fallen and destructive world. A world that will destroy us if we just let it. And God steps in. You
won't even notice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll do it to ourselves. I mean, we see it all the time, people who've destroyed themselves, and we think, what a shame or what a loss. And it is from a human perspective, but by God's grace, He steps in and He gives us the better way. From an eternal perspective, the way, the only way to eternal life through Christ.
Absolutely.
To our kids, modeling that and teaching them that, teaching them about consequences also teaches them that we as good parents want to be a reflection of our Father, the ultimate good parent, in that we want to protect them from the things that would destroy, because sin is a thief. It's a robber. It comes in to steal and destroy. And we want to point them in ways, point them towards the paths that are going to lead to good things. And when it comes to God, the ultimate good thing is a relationship with Him through His Son, Jesus Christ. And so it's very hard to teach a young person, teach one of our children about God if we don't teach them biblically, because they're going to have wrong ideas about God. And it's hard to teach them about the biblical model for God if we don't teach them about sin and about wrong and about the right things that come from positive things and the wrong things that happen because of mistakes we make and sin.
Yeah. It's weird that we've gone this long and we've talked about all of this stuff. We haven't necessarily mentioned the word love, because all that we're talking about the character of God, right? It is love. Giving these consequences, and God giving these consequences in Genesis 49 through Jacob for all of Israel, is God being loving to them, demonstrating to them His own character. Israel is God's child in a sense. He calls Himself the Father of Israel several times in that same way that means, not in a metaphor. I mean, it is a metaphor, but really fatherhood is a metaphor for God's character.
Right.
But He's teaching them here. He's loving them. And so the same for us with our kids. Like when we discipline them and when we punish them and when we show them and give them consequences for their actions, it's because we love them. And we do have to be very careful about not doing it out of love. The consequences.
We don't want to have an overreaction where we get emotional.
Right. We respond in love to our kids all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully that's the goal, right? We're going to mess that up sometimes, but that's the goal. And our kids should never feel like they have lost our love for them because of their actions, because in favor of us. Like we need to be, I don't know how to phrase this, aware. We don't want them to feel that way because we're trying to show them consequences. Even in our efforts to show them consequences, they still need to feel like they are loved, because that's the reality that when God is our Father, when we trust in Him and believe in Him, that's the way He acts with us. He never loses His love for us in order to discipline us or teach us.
And we've talked a lot about a parent's actions towards their children, and it definitely is critical. I mean, these are Jacob's blessings on his sons, and a lot of it was follow-up for his actions throughout their life. The other side of this, though, is that Jacob himself, and we ourselves as parents, we have to be very careful of our own character, because we can't model these things. We can't set our kids on the right path. No matter what we say or how much we try to guide them, we need to be very, very careful and try to be making sure that we in our own personal lives are making the right decisions, that we're doing the right things for the right reasons, which is following Christ, to be godly. And Jacob himself, in becoming more godly, God uses him to establish the nation of Israel, and God's light to the nations through the rest of the world came down through that.
Absolutely.
And we as parents, if we're going to mess up, we're going to make human mistakes, we're going to sin, but we need that to be the minority of the time, and we need our kids to see that we're making that right, that when we do make a mistake, that we own up to it, and that we get back on the right track, that we seek God and seek to be godly as a model for them, and also because personally, that's the best thing for us too.
Yeah.
And we can't do the best things for our kids if we're not doing the best things by God's standards.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. One other thing I think I want to mention before we're done is that God has a plan for our kids, and that's probably going to be different than our plans for our kids. I mean, you look at all of Jacob's kids. They did not turn out the way he had hoped or planned. I guess in a sense it did. He loved Joseph so much, and Joseph turned out to be a really great kid. But and everybody did bow down to him. But God is sovereign over our kids, and we need to be aware of that and respond to how He's leading our kids. Any thoughts on that?
Well, and I think it is important to recognize, that God is sovereign, and that He has His plan, but by His grace and because of His blessings, we get to be a part of that plan. And so there's a very equal truth that we're very responsible for our kids and responsible for how they turn out in terms of the parts that we play into. So even though so to that point, I feel like it's equally important to be praying and to be looking to God to, and especially as our kids get older, it's like, my prayers for my grown-up children, of course, are very different than when they were toddlers. And as they went through the teenage years and things, my prayers became ones of more and more dependence on God, for God to hold them, for God to guide them. Because in their teenage years, of course, teenage years are especially
I don't know teenagers yet.
Well, you're going to get there.
Yeah, I will.
But you've already experienced, I'm sure, some of this, because a lot of human responsibility, or a lot of teaching your kids responsibility and right actions, is giving them a little bit of rope and then pulling it back, giving them these boundaries, and then establishing the boundaries and then the consequences if they make the wrong turns. Well, so as they enter the teenage and go through the teenage years and then become young and hopefully productive and godly adults, then it's the same sort of thing. You have to keep giving them more and more responsibility, and eventually you have to let go of the rope. I mean, they're going to leave the house, they're going to become their own people, but you never stop praying. You always want to be in prayer, always looking to our Heavenly Father, because He's always got the best interest of His children, including our children, the ones we've raised. And so praying to God that He's going to guide them, that He's going to draw them, that they're going to become godly men and women who are going to lead, who are going to raise godly children of their own.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But then none of that undermines our responsibility as parents. especially when they're young. We get more time with them. We get more opportunity to teach, and train them. But even when they're adults, it doesn't undermine our responsibility to be diligent in teaching them. And I was reading William Carey's biography, or one of his biographies about him, and he said that in his inquiry about missions, he said, we often pray, but we often neglect the ordinary means to achieve the things that we pray for. Mm-hmm. So as a father of a young child, you're praying certain things about your kid. I pray that they will learn this. I pray that they learn to know you. I pray, that they stop doing this thing.
Yeah.
And then as they get older, you're praying for different things. I pray that you give them wisdom as they raise their kids when they have them. I pray that you bless them with finances and wisdom about their job. But all the while, we're wholly trusting in God. But we're not neglecting the ordinary means that we have in their lives to achieve those things.
That's right.
If you're praying for your adult child for wisdom to make the wise decisions in their job, and you're not trying to share wisdom with them, then you're missing it.
Right. And you're missing out on a blessing.
Praying. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You got to do both.
Right.
Gotta do both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And part of the blessing that comes from that, when we have grown children, is that relationship continues. So by building in and praying for and doing the right things, being good parents, then we get to continue to build on that relationship as they get older too. And I think with Jacob, he got the blessing of seeing Joseph rise to basically second in the kingdom of Egypt, of a very strong, very powerful nation. And he was blessed to get to renew that relationship with Joseph that he thought he'd lost. Mm-hmm. And in this case, not through his own actions, but he was blessed by that grown-up relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we can hope for and be blessed by as well, is to raise godly children that are then going to grow up to bless others and be a blessing to us. And we continue to be hopefully to pour into them and to pour into to their lives as well.
In heaven, we will be worshiping alongside our children with God as mature believers, and that's an exciting thing to look forward to.
Yep. Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to our podcast, episode 36, talking about Israel's blessing and parenting. If you have any questions, you can email us at waystheyshouldgo@gmail.com, and we'll respond to that there, or maybe address it in an episode. Please share this with anyone else you think might be interested, and we will be back next week.